Okay, sorry. I have
Hi, Therese. How are you?
Hi, good. So good to see you.
Very good to see you again. Um, please let us know. I understand you have something new you'd like to share with us.
Yes, well, I have been doing some wonderful studying in preparation for WESAC following this beautiful retreat I attended on Twin Flames. And a lot of the information in both the retreat and these teachings of Gautama Buddha from the various sources that have been published by the Summit Lighthouse really dovetail into a whole new awareness that I am experimenting with and downloading as a becoming through calls and prayers and meditation and all of that. And so I'm looking forward to just sharing more.
Great. You mentioned a couple things that many of us probably do not know. What you mentioned, we sock and twin flames. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, the term WESAC, I was just talking to my daughter about it this morning. WESAC is the celebration of the birth, the enlightenment, and the ascension or Mahasamadhi of Lord Gautama Buddha. And this happened about 500 years before Jesus walked the earth. And
Great.
it is a holiday or a special, well, holy day that is celebrated in the East, very much so for, since that time every year. In fact, in the teachings on theosophy, the clairvoyant Ledbetter gave a beautiful description of the WESAC ceremonies that take place in a great valley in the Himalayas. It's in the book, The Masters in the Path, and I highly recommend people look at that if they want to have a description of the WESAC festivities, where all of these yogis and bhikkhus gather in the hills, and Lord Gautama descends from the etheric plane as the Lord of the world and blesses them and blesses water. They bring water to have their water turned to holy water and all of that. And then there are many souls who attend in their finer bodies, meaning souls who are students of the light on the inner who are asleep at night because this is going on. They're in the West, most likely they're asleep when this is going on because it's happening on the time of the Himalayas. And so they get to go and participate in this ritual. Now, I was explaining to my daughter that WESAC fell on the full moon in the month of May. And this is when the moon is in the sign of Scorpio and the sun is in the sign of Taurus. Now, the sun and the moon, when we have a full moon, the full moon is always directly opposite the sun sign. It's only during the full moon because the moon has very rapidly progressing phases. Every couple of days, the moon changes as it waxes and wanes. But when it's full, it's always opposite the sign of the sun. So when Gautama Buddha was born, the moon was a full moon in the month of May in the sign of Scorpio. The sun was in Taurus. And when he had his enlightening experience under the bo tree that I just realized today was a banyan tree, and we have so many of them in Florida, it's very sweet to think of this. Also, Hawaii and other places, you see these beautiful giant banyan trees. And I didn't realize that that was the tree that the Buddha had sat under to reach his enlightenment. And it's a beautiful, beautiful giant tree. Anyway, so that happened also during the full moon of Scorpio and WESAC. And he touched the ground and said, "The earth is my witness." And then when he made his transition, and it said he either died of accidental poisoning or of natural causes. In any case, he withdrew from his body like many adepts in the East do. And this was also during the full moon of the month of May. So May is a very special month. It's the month where we celebrate the Buddha. It's also the month where we celebrate Mother Mary as Queen of the May. And there's a very special connection between Buddha and Mother Mary because she is the Mare, the Mary, and he is the Buddha. And so he represents the aspect of Father Alpha, the crown, and she represents Mother Omega, the base of the spine. And when there is that flow that happens between the Buddha and the Mother, we have the expansion of Christ consciousness, which is represented and amplified and exemplified by Jesus. So just wanted to mention that so Wesak, we're looking forward to a beautiful celebration. It's every year, and we are blessed on the inner by the Buddha. And I was pondering today how the Buddha leads us to Jesus and how Jesus leads us to the Buddha, how the two are in figure eight flow. Now, the concept of twin flames, I'd like to preface that with this teaching that came through the Summit Lighthouse that Gautama Buddha gave. And it's a wonderful teaching about flames and how every master who has ascended, every person who ascends back to God through the ritual of the ascension, having balanced their karma and fulfilled their divine plan, their dharma, and balanced their threefold flame, and fulfilled the various requirements for the ascension, becomes free of rebirth. It's interesting that Gautama, when he came into that lifetime, it has been said that as a newborn babe, he said, "This is my last life. I will be free from rebirth." And so he apparently walked and spoke as soon as he was born, according to the legends. And so anyway, we see that every ascended master in heaven, Gautama Buddha tells us, is a flame. And so each one of us is intended to perfect and become the fullness of the flame that we are. The flame is a direct emanation of God that is unique to us, personified by us, and holds a divine attribute, quality, sound, keynote, vibration. And so that flame is shared by one other being in the entire cosmos, who is our twin flame. And so twin flames were created by God in the beginning. Our mighty I Am Presence, our divine self, created two sparks of life and light, alpha and omega, positive and negative polarity. And these flames incarnated into physical form, into human existence. And the idea was to perfect the qualities of God in the physical plane, to have God be in matter as in spirit. So when Jesus said, "Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven," that was the point of twin flames, to materialize the kingdom of God on earth as in heaven. And so this went on for many eons, and it's happened on many other systems of the world, not just Earth. In fact, I was recently revisiting the teaching that on Venus, souls, the planet Venus is actually operating at the fifth level of the etheric octave. So we don't see it from our outward spatial instruments, but there is life evolving on Venus, and we know that from many different spiritual sources, including the book Phyllis of Tibetan and his book Dweller on Two Planets. And so we have been told that there are souls on Venus who are making their ascension. Not everyone on Venus has ascended. And so that's interesting, because the masters have even told us that there are souls on Venus who are our twin flames. And so anyway, the point is that there is a special one who has the direct polarity of our soul, who is in direct polarity to our soul and has a direct substance, God's substance that we have. And it's a unique and divine blueprint of Alpha and Omega. And so twin flames journey through time and space. And since the fall of the fourth root race, which was root race of souls. There were different root races of souls. So there was the first three root races were operating on the blue ray of God power. They evolved for 14,000 years, and the root race of that were operating on the wisdom of aspect of God came in, and they made their ascension. And then those that came in on the pink love ray of God came in and made their ascension. And then those that came in on the fourth ray of the white fire, the Divine Mother, came in, and it was during that time that we had the fall of the angels. And this is all part of the teachings of the Ascended Masters and also esoteric tradition. And so basically, when the angels fell, and we have this in the book of Revelation where Michael cast out Lucifer and the angels, they were wroth and went after the mother and her children. And so we have this fall on the white ray. And this is where we see the perversions of the ray of God being this flame of purity and wholeness and the divine feminine. And basically people fell through this entire culture of sex, drugs, rock and roll, the misuses of the base of the spine chakra. And so Gautama Buddha explains in this teaching on flames that we have to be very careful, because there are the flames of heaven, the fires of heaven, and then there are the fires of hell. And we know this even from the call Mother Mary gives, where she says, this is one of the Fatima prayers, where she says, lead all souls to heaven, especially those who are most in need. And she says, save us from the fires of hell. And so Gautama Buddha speaks about these fires of hell as being red and black. And we can also see, if we look at the book Climb the Highest Mountain, that there are the various perversions of all of the seven rays. And I would believe from this that there are perverted flame colors on all of these perverted colors, and that would include even colors like olive and orange and gray and brownish colors and ochre and all that. And so anyway, the point is, though, he mentions specifically the black and the red, and he says the black is even more dangerous than the red, and the black is the flame of death, of the soul death, and it's really the misuse of power. And we see that in church and state. We see that it's where the pride takes over, and people on a vibrational level turn black. And we have to be very careful about that. The red flame would be where people are consumed by passions of different sorts. And Mother has taught us about the Martian energies, and that would include everything from argumentation, accusation, to the various angers and also the lusts and all of that. And so we must be careful about these flames. But getting back to the concept of twin flames, we want to become the fullness of our particular divine flame, the particular expression of God that God created in the beginning. And we want to reunite with our twin flame. And so this teaching that I was graced to attend was a teaching that Elizabeth Clare Prophet gave on twin flames. And she explained that the best way we can return to our twin flames is to return to our God self. When we pursue the path of climb the highest mountain, the path that Gautama Buddha calls the mountain of nirvana, we can reunite with our twin flames once we become the fullness of that God self. And so whether our twin flame is already in the heaven world, or whether our twin flame is stuck somewhere in the astral plane, whether that twin flame is embodied or not embodied, whether that twin flame is serving in whatever capacity. This is not necessarily a romantic relationship on the outer. It's an inner relationship of the love of alpha to omega and omega to alpha, but how it actually plays out in human experience can be completely different. In fact, we had experiences like Mother had taught us about how Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were twin flames. And they later re-embodied as the messengers of the I Am movement for Saint Germain as Godfrey and Lotus. And so there are instances, for example, where twin flames can be embodied in the same gender. There can be Twin flames can be father and son. They can be brother and sister. They can be student and teacher. They can be husband and wife. I mean, it runs a whole gamut of human experience. And so the best gift we can give to our twin flame and to our own soul is, like Saint Germain said, the great divine director said in the Shakespeare story, Much Ado About Nothing, get thee to heaven, Beatrice, get thee to heaven. So that's our role, to get to heaven. And so anyway, we went through a lot of the different experiences of twin flames. I'd like to pause on a couple of them that were especially significant. One of them was where Mother went through she picked 12 operas on each of the lines of our cosmic clock. There are 12 lines of the cosmic clock. And so each of these operas had a story of twin flames, or represented a twin flame story. And in every case, it had to do with love, intense love, and then death, these are like the two themes of opera, right? Love and death. It's typically, most operas have a tragic outcome, though few don't. And so we were going through all these stories, and Mother started laughing. And then she said, it wouldn't be so funny, except we've been through this so many times. And I was remembering this story my grandfather told me when I was a little girl about these insects, which in French are called éphémères. And I looked it up, and in English, they're mayflies. And mayflies are known to live an extremely short time, reproduce, which is love in that kingdom, and then they die. And so it's an interesting thing that the elemental kingdom is showing us, just like butterflies show us the process of chrysalis, and I believe the process of the ascension or the resurrection. So these éphémères, mayflies, show us this constant succession of love and death, which Mother was showing us in these twin flame experiences, having to do with the various operas. The one that stood out for me, though, that didn't have complete death, was the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, where Eurydice fell in the astral plane, and Orpheus went to get her, and the god said, if you go into the astral plane, you have to, in the planes of hell, this was in the ancient Greek times, so they called it Hades. If you go into the realms of Hades, take your lyre, take your harp and play. And Orpheus was a musician. He wrote all these songs of the gods. And so he went down to get Eurydice, and Eurydice followed him, and the hosts of Hades calmed down, or let him in with his music. And the one condition he had was that he was not to look back. He was not to look back at her until they had reached the heaven world. And she thought he was aloof. This is Mother telling the story. She thought he was aloof. And so she complained and complained and complained and didn't want to follow him anymore. And or was giving him a bit of a difficult time. And so finally he turned around to give her a hug, an embrace, and then she died in his arms. And so next, according to the opera, the god of love had mercy on them and allowed them to enter the temple of love for a brief period of time and to experience that temple of love. And I was pondering that later about the god of love, and I realized that must have been Sanat Kumara. And so anyway, this is the only one that I heard of the 12 that had seemingly a better ending if you look at all of these lines of the clock and twin flame stories. But we have to get to that place where we transcend the cycles of rebirth, which is what Gautama Buddha came to do. He left his family, he left his wife, he left his children, he left his kingdom on earth to anchor the kingdom of heaven, just like Jesus, when Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." And so we have to understand that that is really the goal and the journey and the story of all twin flames in order to get back to the heaven world. Now, the other point I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on is the story of the Garden of Eden, because we know that Eden was a mystery school in Lemuria, and Lord Maitreya was the guru or the teacher, the one who was the overseer of this mystery school. And so what happened at Maitreya's mystery school was that Adam and Eve fell, but not only Adam and Eve, many twin flames, Mother tells us. And so this is really an archetypal story of our soul. This is where it gets interesting, especially interesting, because we know in Hebrew, in the Kabbalist tradition, Adam is also the soul, the universal soul of Adam Kadmon. And we read in the Buddhist teachings that Gautama Buddha is the soul of the universal soul of the Buddha, meaning he represents the Buddha for all of our souls. And just like Jesus represents the universal Christ for all of our souls. And so just like Paul was saying that we fell in Adam and we are redeemed in Christ, so we are redeemed also in Buddha. And these are just different levels of consciousness, because Christ is at the level of the Christ self and Buddha is at the level of the Buddhic self. One is at the level of the heart and Christ consciousness, and the middle figure in the chart, the presence, and the other one is at the level of the Buddhic consciousness, which is the I am that I am. And so what happened was that these twin flames were given the temptation by serpent to partake through Eve, through the fallen feminine, partake of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so they decided, well, we want to have the fruits of the tree of life without having to go through the initiations of receiving those fruits through Lord Maitreya. We just want to get the goods. And it was like taking heaven by force. And these fruits of consciousness had not been fully processed through, had not been fully digested. One of the things that I was pondering about is how Mother talks a lot about the Word made flesh and about the engrafted Word, and so does Gautama Buddha in this one teaching I was reading in preparation for WESAC, where he talks about how we have to become the teaching. I mean, Jesus said the same thing, not be just hearers of the Word, but doers of the Word. And so we have to be that teaching. And that is a very important quality and consciousness that we have to have. So anyway, getting back to the fruits, they wanted to get the fruit, but they hadn't fully become the fruit because they rejected the initiation, which is what the fallen ones also did. Lucifer did not want to pass the initiations of becoming Christ himself. He could have been given that opportunity. The archangels had the opportunity to incarnate if they had wanted to go through the initiations of Christ, but instead they wanted to be gods from the get-go. They had reached the level of God consciousness, and so they wanted to be gods. And when they fell, because they rejected the Christ and refused to serve the Christ in mankind, they became their own gods, which is why in the Old Testament you see a lot of warnings about the gods with an S. But you also see Moses and even in the writing of Hebrews saying, "No, ye not, you are gods, and all of you are sons of the Most High." And so the difference here is that if you want to be a God that is going to be an eternal, permanent God, you have to go through Christ. You have to become the Christ. You have to be the engrafted Word. You have to embody that Word. You have to assimilate that Word. You have to be the fullness of the Word with a capital W, and not just be hearers of the Word or even teachers of the Word who don't practice what they preach, which we find a lot in the churches and primarily in the churches, because that's where they teach the Word. So anyway, the point is that this is where the fallen ones took the children of God and the twin flame couples who were actually advanced adepts, and they left the etheric plane. They found they were naked. They were given these coats of skin, which is the four lower bodies. They could no longer vibrate at the consciousness of the etheric plane. Their karma demanded that they go down in consciousness. And so Adam followed Eve out of love for his twin flame, and many twin flames did the same. And just like Orpheus went and followed Eurydice into the astral plane to redeem her, so these twin flames who had so much love for each other, the masculine followed the fallen feminine principle, and the fallen feminine principle is where we had our energies go down into the base of the spine chakra, go down into the perversions of the mother flame. Again, the entire sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture, which basically deprives us of the ascent of our Kundalini energies back into the crown, back into the heart where Christ is, back into the crown where Buddha is. And so basically we are, this fallen feminine situation is what we have to redeem. And this is what Gautama Buddha did when he defeated the armies of Mara. He defeated the daughters of Mara, which are the senses, the five senses. And he said, the earth is my witness. He touched the ground. He gave that mudra, and he restored a pathway for souls to come back up the mountain of God, to rise from the fallen base back up, first to the heart and then to the crown. And I was thinking about how Jesus 500 years later was sent not just to demonstrate the path of Buddhahood, because I know Jesus was a Buddha. He went to India and he studied the teachings of the Buddhas, and there's no doubt he was a Buddha. He did the same miracles that Gautama Buddha did. Well, many of the, I wouldn't say the same necessarily, though they both walked on water, they both did various healings and so forth. But I just have to say one of my favorite Gautama Buddha miracles is where he took a toothpick and turned it into a tree, which I thought was very sweet and funny. And so anyway, they both had miracles. Jesus went to learn these, to be the Buddha. And then he came back, and his demonstration in his Palestinian mission was to be the Christ, to be the mediator, to be the go-between, the human, the soul condition, and the divine, the Buddha, the Father. I and my Father are one, says the Christ. And he was one with the Buddhic self, one with his Buddhic consciousness, but he had to exemplify the redemption of Christ's consciousness. And that means that he had to experience, for all to see, the death, which here was the crucifixion, and the, where heaven meets earth as that cross of light. And then he had to resurrect. He demonstrated the resurrection from death, and was still able to walk the earth afterwards. And so instead of Buddha going on into higher planes, into nirvana, Jesus demonstrated a different aspect of the law. But of course, they both, I believe, work together very much so, and still do. And so anyway, both of these masters and every other avatar master adept that the Brotherhood has sent throughout the ages, be it Zarathustra or Confucius or Lao Tzu, Moses, there's so many of them, right? In ancient Egypt, thinking of Isis and all of that. Anyway, all of these ones, and the feminine ones, Kuan Yin, Mother Mary, and so many more, they came to show us the way home in their own particular way and flame. And they have given us the treasures of their attainment and realization. Lord Lanto, for example, walked with an expanded threefold flame that could be seen through his chest. And so we see that they all give us their causal body attainment. They all give us, if we can receive it, if we're able and willing to receive it, they help us to also make it home so that we can anchor our own particular flame when we get to heaven and rejoin the body of God in a permanent way. And that is really the overcoming of the fall of twin flames. Now, one of the teachings that Mother gave on this was that the twin flames fell because of on 3 points, particularly the serpent gave them 3 points and of testing, or you could say of temptation. And the first one had to do with, I'm going to take care of my own economy, my own survival in the world, which we see people doing all the time. It's an inherited coping mechanism, even in our families and all that. It's psychology that says we have to be part of the world. I was just going to this seminar this week where I was, it had to do with different financial things, and I was understanding just how much the fallen ones have created a culture of looking after their own in the physical plane through the appropriation of funds and finances and all of the various things that they do in terms of everything, including manipulations of taxes and law and everything else to be able to provide for their own. And it's really a perversion of God being the supplier of our need. And both Jesus and Gautama had espoused this sense of God will provide, and both of them asked their disciples to basically go with almost nothing and to be provided for by God. It's a completely different system. If your system of abundance is based on waiting for God to guide you and to give as you go, and El Mori says pay as you go, but it's also asking for God to give as you go versus to stock things up and stash things up and provide ways for creating a human security versus counting on the manna to fall each day like the Israelites in the desert, whether it was the manna or the quail. So anyway, these are two completely different systems. One is the fallen system and the other is the God system. And we on the planet have been definitely initiated in the fallen system for a long time. And that's one of the systems that we have to overcome. The second one was that Mother talked about with Eve, had to do with vanity, lusts, the whole misuse of you could say of the mother, but it's really idolatry, self-idolatry, all the things that we see in the entertainment industry and the media and all of that. And it's a beautification of the senses. It's like the daughters of Mara, and so that is the second aspect of you shall not surely die. Each one of these came up with you shall not surely die. If you take the fallen angels' economic systems, you shall not surely die. If you take the perversions of the woman and her seed as these the vanity of this world, you shall not surely die, and the lust of this world. And then the last one had to do with the misuse of wisdom, the pride of the fallen ones, the pride that we see again and again in church and state, and it has to do with creating these artificial bastions of pride based on the misuse of the intellect rather than going to the divine self and the true teaching of God that comes through the heart of humility. You see, it's really important to have that humility and to have that sense of humor. Otherwise, we move into the level of the fallen angel perversions of wisdom. We move into the Vatican Library. We move into all of these places where they hoard the wisdom. They hoard the money. They hoard the wisdom. They hoard the teachings. And they use it for their own gain. And I was pondering this, and then I happened to see it in one of the books on the Buddha. I was calling it the Python consciousness, where it's like this snuffing out, snuffing out of the life force to feed yourself. And it's a fallen angel serpent trait. And Jesus said, woe to you, generation of vipers. So this serpent theme is all the way through. And Gautama Buddha talks about it as these vines in the plant kingdom that snuff out the life force. And so we have to be very careful with that, because it's tremendously karma making, and ultimately it's parasitism. And we don't want to be on the side of the fallen angel parasites. We want to be on the side of those who are sitting under their own vine and fig tree and getting the fruit straight from the I am that I am and the Christ self. And so again, there's a difference there. And so Eve fell on these three, and all of the fallen ones who left Eden fell on these three. And then we see Buddha having to face the same initiations. He had to face the daughters of Mara, which would be the vanity, also the vanity, that second one that I was speaking of with Eve. He had to face the daughters of Mara and not give in to that. He had to face the armies of Mara, which were threatening his viability in the physical plane, where the arrows eventually turned to rose petals. But before that happened, he had to really face the armies of Mara, and it's all about turning the other cheek. It's all about basically being that boomerang where whatever is sent at you is sent back to sender. And then he had to face, as on the initiation of the perversions of wisdom, his own dweller on the threshold that he called architect. And he says, at last I see you. And architect says, well, you live in me. First, the architect flatters him and says, you are a god. Will you be my god? You're so wise now. Won't you be my god? And Gautama Buddha says, aha, now I've met you. You are the arch deceiver of my own creation. And I am not going to have anything more to do with you. Be gone. And that reminds me of when the Master Godfrey, who was embodied as Guy Ballard, said one day he decided he had had enough with his dwelling threshold, and he said, I'm not following you anymore. And it was done. And we have to get to that place where we can face the architect of our own miscreation in the electronic belt, which is the kettle drum of energy around us, that is untransmuted and made of human creation and not of God's stuff, because the God stuff goes back up to our causal body every day. Every good thought, deed, and action that we do goes back up to the causal body. The things that we do that are not pure, impure thoughts, feelings, actions, and so forth, are stored in our electronic belt for future transmutation. Jesus said every jot and tittle, we're going to have to balance it all or transmute it all. And one of the ways to do it in a more expedient way is through the violet flame, through the fire of the heart, through the love fire, because that will literally burn it through much faster. But in any case, we have to go through it. We have to go through the records of the electronic belt. We have to go through the footstool kingdom of our own creation. And then we also have to, oftentimes, part of the requisites on the path is to balance that world karma and to also hold the balance for planetary conditions. And we do so when we also pray for the world and make calls and all of that. And so anyway, these are some of the things that, so Gautama Buddha had to face these three and overcome them. When he finally overcame the last one, and he did not, fall to the flattery of his own ego, but said, the earth is my witness, I am that I am. That one went away, and he passed through those three initiations. Jesus did the same when he was tempted by the devil. He was first told, make these stones, turn them into bread. And of course, Jesus was hungry because he'd been fasting for so many days. And so I see that again as this perversion of the economy, this, keep yourself going, ensure your physical preservation initiation that Eve was given. Then the second one is where he said, if you fall down from this mountain and see if the angels will come and catch you. And I'm paraphrasing now, but basically that to me is a perversion of wisdom. I believe that. Some people might say they want to sort it out in a different way, but for me, that's how it resonates. And he said, no, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. And then the last one was where the devil said, if you fall down and worship me, I will give you all the kingdoms of this world, all the vanity, all the adoration, adulation, monies, but also, anything and everything that people look for in the human condition. If you look at the game of life, and it's like, do you want some fame? Do you want some money? Do you want some love? But it's the lower sense of love. It's really the relative good and evil instead of the absolute good. And so people are, always brought into these things, and all of it leads to death ultimately. And that's what we've been dealing with for so many lifetimes. And so Jesus said, no, I get thee behind me, Satan. And you have to think about what would have happened if Jesus had not passed that initiation. He threaded the eye of the needle for all of us there, just like Gautama Buddha did at the level of the Buddhic self. Jesus did it at the level of the Christ self. And we know from the teachings that these arch deceivers, there were 3 arch deceivers that took over the mental quadrant of this planet, and they took over the mental quadrant of our karmic clock, I should say, because, but anyway, we have Lucifer, who was on the 3 o'clock line of God, of ego control. He traded God control for ego control. He fell because of pride and all of the perversions of the 3 o'clock line: pride, arrogance, ego, etc. And Mark Prophet, at a certain point in time, gave a fiat where Lucifer was taken through Mark Prophet, because Mark Prophet had to rise to that attainment. And we know Mark was the embodiment of Adam. We know that from the teachings. And so then, a number of years later, I believe it was in the late 80s, Mother gave a dictation, where Satan was taken. She made the call for the taking of Satan. And so Satan was on the 4 o'clock line, the perversion of love. So the first Lucifer was perversion of power in the mental quadrant. Satan, perversion of love in the mental quadrant. He falls, or he is taken, but he represented disobedience, stubbornness, defiance of the law, and all of the perversions of the 4 o'clock line, and perversions of love. And we see that still in the whole satanic culture, a lot of that, including music and everything else. And so he was taken, and that was to clear that aspect of the 4 o'clock line, restoring it to God obedience. As far as we know, serpent has not yet been taken. Serpent, 5 o'clock line. And that's a line of our beloved Master Moria also. And the misqualifications on that 5 o'clock line have to do with envy, jealousy, ignorance of the law, vain competition. When Jesus in the Jesus Watch says, let the sense of vain competition be stayed, because it has separated brother from brother and splintered the holy innocent cause of faith to manifold arrows of mortal hostility. That's what we're dealing with here on the line of serpent. And we have to overcome vain competition. And we all have to strive, because we've been programmed to have vain competition, whether it's with our siblings growing up, or whether it's with people we work with, or wherever it comes from. He's seen in all different kinds of scenarios. And so we have to reclaim that line of serpent. When that serpent is taken, and I'm calling for all of this to be for the taking of serpent, for the reclaiming of the mental quadrant, so that we can finally have the mental plane of this planet cleaned out, which will allow so many souls then to find the teachings and ultimately come into the path that will lead to their ascension. But we have to defeat the consciousness that says, you will not surely die if you compromise here and there. You will not surely die if you use the economic systems of this world and have concupiscence and greed. You will not surely die if you engage in vanity and in all kinds of lusts, and that includes sexual misqualifications, and that includes the misuse of music and so forth, rhythm and everything. You will not surely die if you engage in pride and sanctimoniousness and all of those things that are the perversions in that area of the misuse of wisdom. And so, and of course we know, and this was a dictation Gautama Buddha also gave us, how important, he said, how important is the Sangha, how important it is to preserve the community, how important it is to preserve the mystery school, the community, the Sangha of the Buddha, and how so many communities over time and space have been wrecked. I mean, we see it again and again and again, the destruction of community over and over again by these very serpentine conditions that ultimately lead us away from having the brotherhood that we were intended to have and anchor in that 5 o'clock line. So this is, and there's a big difference between acting, remember ye are brethren, versus the divide and conquer that we see on this 5 o'clock line. And El Mori is standing right there on that line, and he's saying thus far no farther, we've got to get this right. So, I mean, that's my perception. I'm not speaking for any of the masters. They can speak for themselves, but I perceive certain things that I believe are true, at least for me, help me on my path and understanding, and that's what I'm sharing. And you are welcome to take it or leave it and do as you see fit and helpful for your own path and journey. But that's really where we are. And so we're here to reclaim the ball of the mystery school. It's interesting that the Ascended Masters called the Royal Teton Ranch and the Summit Lighthouse Maitreya's Mystery School. It's interesting how Gautama Buddha is the sponsor of Summit University, along with Lord Maitreya, who was so both of them are the sponsors, and Gautama Buddha also the sponsor of the Summit Lighthouse, one of the founding sponsors. And so we see this again and again. He's also with Jesus, the sponsor of the Church of Jerusalem Triumphant. So really Buddha is in all of these branches, whether it's Summit University, Summit Lighthouse, Church of Jerusalem Triumphant. And we really have to have his consciousness, the Buddhic consciousness. We have to gain that awareness to really have the fulfillment of thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, which is the precipitation of the New Jerusalem as a city four square in us. And so I've said a lot, but that was what I have been pondering as far as WESAT goes, and as far as Twin Flames go, and as far as making thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And I sure pray fervently for the redemption of that middle quadrant. We have been wrestling and entangled with these fallen ones for so many lifetimes. I mean, today they're electing another pope. I believe it's supposed to happen today. And I was like, I had some friends here. I live in a Catholic community, and this one friend who said, please pray for the pope. She says, please, let's all pray to Catherine of Siena, St. Catherine of Siena. And I thought, well, that's wonderful, because St. Catherine of Siena is an embodiment of Guru Ma. So Guru Ma, please help us with this pope. I said, if he's good, I would be so glad to have a good pope. We've had a few, including Pope John the 23rd. And if he's not, then I ask for the flame of the Rurieti to be right in his seat so that he goes for the judgment, because every erg of light and energy, every position of power that you're given is going to either be for your edification in Christ or for your judgment. We have to be careful not to idolize people in power, because we have to understand they're given power so that they can either turn their ship around in humility and Christ consciousness for real in the flame of brotherhood and goodwill, or they are going to be judged. And they are most likely not going to get another ticket to reincarnate in this time and age, which is why Gautama Buddha says, I'm impatient, I'm tapping my foot. You think you have time and you don't. I'm quoting from his dictations here. And other teachings where he is telling us, this is the end of the age and you have better get it right. Because the next unfoldings are going to be for the sixth root race. Well, the fifth root race came in, and they were on the green ray of truth, and many have embodied. I believe they started embodying it during the time of Atlantis. Then we have the sixth root race that incarnated more recently, and they were all around the time of Jesus, and they have come on this ray of ministration and service, and they are determined. These young, devout Christian or Christ-loving souls are determined to be ministration and service galore. I mean, they are determined to be the Good Samaritan. They're determined to follow their Jesus and to do everything they can to walk in the footsteps of what would Jesus do, right? And then we know that the great divine director has started or is starting to sponsor the seventh root race of souls, which is coming in on the violet ray. It's supposed to incarnate primarily in South America with Saint Germain, under like the dispensation of Saint Germain for the Aquarian age. And so we don't even, like, we can imagine what these souls are going to be bringing in as far as an awareness of the violet flame, of transmutation, of alchemy, of all of these glorious Aquarian age principles, which are going to bring in eventually, by the grace of God, and ultimately the golden age of Aquarius. And so the old souls from the white ray, the old souls of Lemuria, even Atlantis, the old souls who have had so many embodiments and so many opportunities to re-embody and to correct their ship, these are the ones who were given Jesus and Buddha and all these other masters. If we don't get it right and come home in this cycle, we are going to the judgment. There's just no other opportunity as far as I can tell. I mean, we are all going to be going through the trial by fire. The fire tries every man's works, of which sort it is. And if your work isn't based on goodwill and humility and the fire of the heart, this is why Gautama Buddha says, I will kindle. He says, if you call to me, I will give you that heart of love. If you have that hardness of heart, call to me, I will give you that heart of love. It's possible. It's possible. We have the 51% dispensation. There are so many of our friends in heaven rooting for us who have made their ascension, who are waiting. And this is our true community. And given a dispensation such as the teachings and not making the most of it is going to be such an extraordinary karma. Also, given the dispensation of the teachings and not really putting it forth out into the world, it's going to be an enormous karma. Because Mother and the masters can speak for themselves to contact the souls. They can speak for themselves. They don't need interpreters and translators and people who pose as an intermediate. To be careful, the words of Jesus where he said, beware those who will not enter in and who will prevent those from entering in, who will prevent those who would enter in from entering. We have to be very careful with that consciousness, which is again that serpent consciousness. And so we have a tremendous amount of opportunity here in this time and age to really put forth the teachings. I was thinking today, I was looking at these various radio broadcasts, and I was like thinking, you know, we could just have Mother on there 24/7, just speaking to the world without any control mechanism. Why muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn? That's my question. It's a question we must all ask ourselves, because ultimately it's a karma that we will all have to account for, and it's a dharma that we are all intended to facilitate. And that's why we found the teachings. That's why we became keepers of the flame for Saint Germain and for the threefold flame in our hearts and our Kumara Gautama Buddha Jesus. So if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer more questions. I kind of went on a different trajectory, but it was a nice one too. It's important.
Thank you. Yeah, just some definitions. root race. People might figure it out, but I'd rather it defined. Root races. You could be very brief if you want. Races, mother, keepers of the flame.
Okay, root races. This is a teaching that was also in the Bridge to Freedom and in Theosophy, I believe, but certainly in the Summit Lighthouse too. It's this idea, not this idea, this actuality that the souls came forth from God on the various rays of God. There are 7 major rays and 5 minor rays. We're talking right now about the 7 major rays of God, the colors of God, the frequencies of God, the fires and flames of God that are in the causal body. And so God sent forth mandalas or groups of souls in each of these rays, in each of these frequencies or color bands of the causal body. And so the root races were literally the soul mandalas that came from each of these bands of the causal body. And so the first band, and we're talking on Earth as far as I know. I mean, of course, I would think that every planet would have its own evolution. In this case, we're talking about Earth. So we had the root rays, souls embodied on the blue ray of will and faith and protection and God government. We had the souls that embodied on the yellow ray of wisdom and illumination. And we had the souls that embodied on the pink ray of love and creativity and Holy Spirit energies, comfort flame, all of those beautiful pink qualities. And then we had the souls that embodied on the ray of purity. And it was purity, the divine mother, this also corresponds to sculpting and architecture and building and math. Mathematics is white and green, but the point is that it's the light of the divine mother. It's the base of the spine. It's the light of the ascension. And so this is where the fall took place. And this happened on Lemuria, which was a continent that sank a long, long time ago, in the land of Mu, which was primarily in the Pacific. And this is where the fall took place. These archangels, starting with Lucifer and others. There's Peshwalga, Satan, who was almost an archangel, and serpent, and so forth. And they fell. They took down a third of the angels with them, approximately. That's what the Book of Revelation describes. And so this fall took place at that time. And this is also where the mystery school of Lord Maitreya was, in Lemuria. And so anyway, so these are the root races. Then we move on to the 5th root race, green. Then we move on to the God and Goddess Meru, 6th root race. Well, I should say that these root races, since the fall, I don't know who the sponsoring masters were of the 3 first root races that did not fall, did not make karma, incarnated back and forth with their twin flames, accomplished their soul experience in time and space. It became the fullness of their God self and reunited with God. I don't know who their sponsoring masters were. I don't know if we were ever told, but we know that Lord Himalaya was the master who sponsored the 4th root race of souls. And then we know that Bhata Manu was the one who sponsored the 5th root race of souls on the green ray of truth and healing and vision and abundance. We know that the God and Goddess Meru are the sponsors of the 6th root race of souls that are on the ray of ministration and service. And it's purple and gold. And it's also law. There are different things that fall under that ray. If you read Lords of the 7 Rays by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, you will see what all the rays correspond to. And then the 7th root race, the sponsor of that race is the Great Divine Director. So these are called Manus, these masters. Their position or their title in the sponsoring of these root races is called Manu. So these are the Manus of the root races. And so basically these are mandalas of souls. And right now, planet Earth is at a crossroads, and we have all of these various root races incarnated, meaning 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. We also have everything from laggards who came from Maldek. These were souls that came from Maldek when their planet blew up, which became the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. We have robot creation, which is actually quite ancient. There are souls out there that don't have, or people, sorry, I should say, there are people out there who do not have threefold flames, and possibly souls who don't. There are also beings that don't have souls. We've been told the soulless ones. So it's mechanization concept. We have to be careful right now, because as we look at all these robots wanting to come back in, humanoids, etc., we have to understand that we're dealing with creation that it's not the first time around, and these ones do not have the conscience. They do not have the flame of God. The great divine director warned us about this in his book on the mechanization concept. It is not something the masters can sponsor. There have been alien creations also from other planets that had fallen, that have come to Earth. So Earth has a very large, it's a big pot. I don't even want to call it a melting pot, because I don't want to melt with some of those creatures. But the bottom line is there's a tremendous amount of variegation on Earth, and the masters have told us, Mark said, what Mark Twain had said, that truth is stranger than fiction, that there's a lot going on Earth. But the most important thing is for us to hold that flame of Christ consciousness, and to continuously reinforce in our prayers and our awareness and everything we do that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. That this is the planet that Sanat Kumara came to save. This is the planet that is intended to ascend back to God. This is the planet that is intended to be and will, by the grace of God, be Saint Germain's great golden age. If it doesn't happen in the physical, it's going to happen in the physical part of the etheric plane, but hopefully it can be anchored in the physical plane. That's the hope, and that's why we're here, to become that fullness of God in our four lower bodies, so that we can then anchor it for the planet, because we know through the law of the one that what we do ultimately impacts the collective. So that's the root races.
Then you mentioned, well, just a couple things. I'm going to throw them all out and you pick which one. Mother, Keepers of the Flame, Avatar, Causal Body, Part of the Presence.
Well, Mother is Guru Ma for me. Mother is, of course, is the Divine Mother, but Mother is Guru Ma. Mother was embodied as Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and many other other beings that she was embodied as, like Saint Catherine of Siena, and Eve. I think that's really the polarity of her being. She came for the redemption of Eve, and so Mother was embodied as Sarah to Abraham's wife, and she was embodied in the French courts and in the Austrian courts and in a lot of places. She was a saint many times. She was also the beautiful Aspasia in ancient Greece, and so she with Pericles, and she was also the mathematician Hypatia in Alexandria. And so anyway, Mother has had many embodiments, and she came to enshrine the light of the Mother. And I remember having a conversation with her where she said to me that her training for messengership had transpired over many lifetimes. Her soul had been prepared for this mission for so many lifetimes, and that's why it cannot be, you can't just copy it or try to be, like take it. You have to honor her being. And she was given the mantle of Guru by Padmasambhava, which is a very special mantle. And what that does is it puts her in the lineage of the Ruby Ray Masters, Sanat Kumara to Gautama, Gautama to Lord Maitreya, Maitreya to Jesus, and Jesus to Padmasambhava, and then to Mother. And so when we were interacting with Mother, we're interacting all the way back to the heart of Sanat Kumara in a very direct way. It's a very direct way. It's like everything fits together, one inside the other. And so I consider that a very special mantle that she carried. So keepers of the flame are those who keep the flame of life, the threefold flame in the heart. And there are many keepers of the flame on this planet. The Master Saint Germain founded the Keepers of the Flame fraternity through the Summit Lighthouse as an outer organization or an outer expression, creation or manifestation, you could say, of the keepers of the flame who have kept the flame of life through all ages. I mean, Zarathustra was a keeper of the flame, right? And so was Gautama Buddha, and so was Jesus, and so are the apostles and many others. But now we have this, and Saint Germain, as the Knight Commander of the Keepers of the Flame fraternity, gave us 33 lessons to study that prepare us on this path of the teachings of the Ascended Masters. It's a very important honor, I think, to be a keeper of the flame. When I first heard about the Keeper of the Flame fraternity, I had found the teachings in South America, and then I went to Washington, D.C., and I had seen the book Science of the Spoken Word in one of the libraries of Buenos Aires, but I hadn't really picked it up. I was working on all of the I Am books of Saint Germain, and all in Spanish, actually. And then I came back to Washington, D.C., and I was walking through the bookstore in Union Station, and the train station, and this book just fell off the shelf, and it was The Science of the Spoken Word. So I picked it up, and I looked at the back, and it said, "Call here if you want to be a keeper of the flame." And so I called them up, and I said, "I want to be a keeper of the flame." And they said, "Don't you want to know anything about it first?" I said, "Nope, I just want to be a keeper of the flame." And so that's what the keeper of the flame is, the one who keeps the flame of life, the one who expands that threefold flame of love, wisdom, and power in the heart. And if you join the Keeper of the Flame fraternity, you will certainly get many lessons that will help you to keep more of that flame, and to have the direct sponsorship of Saint Germain also, which is important. Yeah. So that was that. What was the other question?
Causal body attainment.
Okay, causal body attainment. It's we talked about the causal body. If you look at the chart of the presence, and I'm sure you can find that online. I know you can find that online. It's the chart that the masters have asked us to look at. And it's published by the Summit Lighthouse. There was a previous one published by the I Am movement, but it does not differentiate between the Christ and the soul, possibly because they were already functioning from the premise that the Christ and the soul were one. In the dispensation of the Summit Lighthouse, the masters differentiated that very clearly. So we have the lower figure of the chart, who is our human self trying to become God, and we have the Christ self in the center of the chart, who is the mediator, and then we have the I Am presence, who is the Buddhic self, who is the figure in the center of the causal body, the angel of the presence, and the Holy Christ self is the guardian angel. The angel of the presence is at the level of the Buddhic self, and the causal body are all of the rings of color of God consciousness, rainbow rays that we have anchored. And I had worked on a beautiful website called mydivinepresence.com, where you can go and look at all of these spheres of the causal body, along with the teachings and chakras that they correspond to, and even the sphere, the emanations of God from the tree of life in the Kabbalah. So the causal body represents all of our treasures in heaven from every past life. Everything good that we do is not only recorded by our guardian angel, but is stored. It ascends to our causal body at the end of every 24-hour period. And so older souls have larger causal bodies. I think that's why the masters have been so patient, enduring with us, and keep sending us avatars, because we have large causal bodies, and God does not want to see our causal bodies go to waste, meaning that if a soul does not reincarnate and does not ascend, then the soul is canceled out, and the causal body then remains to some degree inert until the I Am presence puts forth a new soul. And so the loss has to do with all the experience in time and space that the soul had. And so if we can take all of our experience in time and space and engage our free will in magnifying the will of God, like Mother Mary said, "My soul doth magnify the Lord," then we can ascend home and become the permanent expression not only of our Christ self, but of our Buddhic self in the causal body. And that is how we will ultimately have the reunion of twin flames that we seek, because the twin flames came from that causal body. So causal body is treasures in heaven. Jesus spoke about it. The Buddhists call it the Sambhogakaya, is the where the soul resides. It's the lower figure in the chart. Sambhogakaya, I can never say this right. Nirmanogakaya, I think it is. Nirmanogakaya. Anyway, that's the middle one, the Christ. It's interesting to think of the Christ as a Buddha, but as a Buddhic figure. But that's the second figure in that chart. And then the Dharmakaya, which is the third figure, which is the body of Dharma, which is our Dharma. Our divine plan is to reunite with our causal body. And we've been told that the great divine director, as the master R, is the one who holds the divine plan of every soul in his causal body. So isn't that interesting how it's all the divine plans, all the dharmas are in the Dharmakaya of the great divine director.
Lastly, Avatar.
Avatar. Well, it was a wonderful TV show that my kids liked when they were little, called Avatar: The Last Airbender. That is actually a pretty good story for children. And I digress there for a minute, but the avatars were beings that were advanced souls that were near enlightenment or enlightened, who came to earth for a divine purpose. In fact, thinking now, John the Baptist was an avatar, and he was actually an ascended master. He had ascended as Elijah and came back in to facilitate the mission of Jesus. He's one of the few, if not only, ascended masters we know who reincarnated and after his ascension, and did that for the mission of Jesus, which was so important to the brotherhood and to the whole planet. To Jesus, by going through the crucifixion, the sacrifice that he made, and dying on the cross and resurrecting, literally bought time for so many souls. And our souls that would have not been allowed karmically to keep reincarnating. He took that on. That's why they say he took on the sins of this world. He did. He bought time so that we could go through the age of Pisces, and then now in the age of Aquarius, we're intended to take up our cross and follow him. We're intended to become that Christ. But until our souls were ready and able, he was like the good physician who came to strengthen us, and he gave that sacrifice so that the karma could be held and held in abeyance. And it was an extraordinary gift. If he had not done this, many of us would have already have gone through the second death as souls. And so that's why we call him our Lord and Savior. He truly saved our souls. He saved our souls from the judgment, the final judgment. And now we have another opportunity by emulating all of his teachings to come home, which is why he did it. So anyway, these are all the avatars. Avatars are beings of great light that came in from the heaven realms with specific levels of teaching. Mother taught us that all of the main religions are on different lines of the clock in different chakras. For example, Christianity is the heart, and Buddhism is the crown, and Hinduism is the base, and so forth. And so they all came with a slightly different facet, just like when the Sufis talk about the elephant, and one person holds the trunk and says, oh, that's like a rope, and another person, anyway, maybe that was a tail that was a rope, but anyway, the trunk is something else. Anyway, the point is, everybody touches a different part of the elephant and says, this is what God is like. And in the end, God is all of it. And we know there's only one God, but many manifestations of that one God, and many manifestations through time and space, and through all of the various religions that appeared as a result of the workings of an avatar, or a being of great light, a teacher who came forth and presented that. as an actuality. You know, all of these teachers were the Word made flesh. They were the engrafted Word. They had assimilated it. They weren't just spouting concepts. They were fully. They had to pass the initiations. That's the difference between the true avatars and those who follow the seed of serpent and the serpent consciousness that says, "Will you be my God? You are so wise, you know, and I will have idolatry for you." No, that is not the way of the true path of God. And we come back to that path in humility and love. And it's interesting, you know, to err is human, to forgive is divine. God will forgive us from our errors of following the serpent consciousness if we will just bend the knee to Christ in one another, to Christ, not to the ego, not to the fallen side, and be one body of Christ, working for Christ, like that song, "Onward, Christian Soldiers." Yes. I think we should stop here. Do you think so too? I think so too. I had the feeling this is how we end. Onward, yes. Christian soldiers.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I appreciate every inspiration and just the dialogue and the love of God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, in you and all of us. Thank you, God.
Thank you.